Welcome back to Silent Husband Club. We've missed you, and we're sorry for the long silence. We're recommitting to you, new stories, every day, raw and honest. Thank you for staying. On the night I turned 45, my wife gave me a gift with a lock. She invited the men who used to be hers and asked them to watch me breathe. I didn't scream. I counted bolts, measured silence, and waited for the moment steel would choose me over her. If this opening pulls you in, please subscribe, like, and drop a comment. It helps the channel grow, and it helps you catch every new chapter the day it drops. By late afternoon the Hudson Valley sun had thinned to copper and glass, spilling across our tall windows like someone carefully laying down sheets of warmth. The light slid over framed moments of us, engagement smiles, a honeymoon snapshot, a glossy holiday card that made strangers believe in us. I stood at the kitchen sink, scrubbing a line of grease from my forearm, the way you rub away a thought you don't want to keep. 12 years of marriage, and I still cleaned the counters before anyone could accuse me of leaving rings of water or crumbs. Habit is love in work clothes, or so I used to think. Vivian's lemon cleaner drifted in the air, fighting with the faint bitter note of cinnamon from a candle she liked to burn for guests. I had picked up a bottle of Pinot she always said paired well with everything and a small bouquet of white calla lilies from a roadside stand near Kingston, flowers with spines, elegant even as they pretended not to be. I arranged them without flair and told myself this is what steadiness looks like, a man making space for a good evening to happen. I told myself a lot of things I no longer believed. When she came into the doorway, she was framed by that same copper light, as if the house itself had decided she needed a stage. Vivian Hart had that gift of clean lines, black dress like ink, auburn hair pinned, mouth that knew how to smile without promising anything. "Please tell me you're not cooking," she said, and I could hear the tease but also the verdict it tried to hide. I played my part. No cooking. I'll leave the fire hazards to the professionals. Her kiss grazed my cheek more like punctuation than affection. "Very obedient," she said. The word snagged in me, small and sharp, the way a splinter does before you know where it came from. She lifted her phone. "I have a surprise. For us." I raised an eyebrow. We didn't do surprises. We did calendars and color-coded blocks and small permissions that looked like kindness. "A party," she added. "Nothing big." I tried my hands, felt the old knot tighten below my ribs. "For my birthday?" "For your birthday," she said, with a calm that had edges. "Come on, they're already here." The house made its quiet old wood sounds as we crossed the living room. The staircase gave a single, familiar creak, like it was clearing its throat before a confession. The backyard had been threaded with warm lights in the trees, and soft jazz moved like a polite ghost between groups of people. Faces I half knew were colleagues from the studio, a few of the brand partners who spoke in enthusiasm and metrics, neighbors who preferred the idea of us to the reality. Glasses lifted when they saw me. I shook hands, I nodded, I repeated the ritual phrases. When you own a small auto shop in a town like ours, you learn to be smooth and quiet about other people's engines. I can listen to a vibration and tell you what's about to fail. That night, the music had a wobble I didn't like. Vivian kept floating just beyond the edge of me, smiling too quickly, taking the temperature of the room as if she were the nurse and this was an emergency no one else could see. I let the ritual carry me an hour. I laughed without remembering the joke. I made myself easy to stand beside. But even as I moved, half of me was elsewhere, in the patterns of her day, the shift in her gaze these past months, the missed beats in our sentences. You learn a lot in a garage with the door half open, what people do when they don't think you're listening, what a lie sounds like when it thinks it's polite. When the cake was cut and someone said something about a wish, she took my hand with a conspirator's pressure. "Come with me," she whispered, and her voice had that bright, practiced hush I'd heard in her videos when she told people they were safe while she rearranged their lives. We crossed the side yard, past the garage that still smelled like winter tires and brake cleaner, to the basement door. Her heels clicked softly on the cement, each step measured, nothing accidental. The hallway below glowed a cool, unfamiliar blue, and I knew before I saw it that something had been done down there without me. Fresh paint where dust used to be, surfaces wiped into compliance, the kind of order you create when you plan to show it off. The basement didn't look like my workshop anymore. It looked like a room made to be seen. Center stage waited for me in steel. A square of bars, welded to a base plate sunk into concrete, about 7 by 7, too small to mistake for storage, too exact to pretend it was decorative. I stopped because stopping was the only honest thing to do. "What is this?" I asked, but I didn't raise my voice. Vivian turned with a smile shaped like a solution. "A game," she said, not flirtatious, not playful. Diagnosed. The basement light flickered once, like an eyelid deciding. The door behind me swung and shut with a clean metal willingness. I heard the locks like distant applause. I didn't move when she dangled the key. I saved my breath, as if the air itself might be rationed. "Happy birthday, Ethan," she said in a tone she used for gratitude posts and brand launches. Then she left me there with the blue light and the scent of lemon and the square of steel that thought it knew me. Silence put a hand on my shoulder. The concrete floor held its own cold like a story it didn't want to tell. I sat down because standing would have been for show. I have learned over years, before the shop, before Kingston, in a different life that taught me about cameras and patience, that the first 15 minutes belong to other people's expectations. If you survive those without feeding them, you can choose your language. Mine has always been quiet. I measured the bars with my eyes. I cataloged welds, base bolts, ceiling anchor points, the small dome in the corner that looked like part of the new home security system she insisted we needed after someone rummaged through cars up the street last fall. She had let me install the wiring because I was good with my hands. It's easy to be good with your hands when you possess a memory that prefers grids. Footsteps approached, unhurried. The basement door opened again and the light shifted. Vivian came barefoot, robe loose over that black dress, a glass of red balancing between two fingers like a garnet on a string. "Still awake," she said, as if she were visiting a pet she fed on schedule. "I was afraid you'd hit your head when the door closed." She circled the cage slowly, trailing a finger along the bars with a pressure that said she loved the idea of touch more than touch itself. "You're calm," she added. "Predictable." She wanted me to flinch, to bargain, to tell her she'd gone too far so she could show me the line and pretend to step back from it. "Is that why you married me?" I asked, not because I needed the answer but because the question would show me her footing. "No," she said, thoughtful, as if we were choosing furniture. "I married you because you were stable. I needed that." Past tense like a door left open to a wind that would later claim it had always been there. She lifted her glass. "Tonight is a celebration." She didn't specify of what. Another door creaked upstairs, heavier steps, and then another, and another. She turned toward the sound with that same bright hush in her face, and called up without looking at me, "Down here." "He's in his gift box." A laugh floated down that wasn't hers. The first man appeared at the top of the stairs, silver at the temples and a shirt buttoned like a decision. He looked at me the way a buyer looks at a clean chassis, curiosity, not conscience. Then a second, athletic, professionally careless, and then 4 more. 6 in total. They each had the look of someone who had once been the center of a room and still believed the room owed them that memory. They didn't address me. They addressed Vivian. They kissed her cheek and pressed her shoulder and spoke in shorthand that tried to turn me into scenery. I watched the choreography of their hands and eyes and never moved closer than my breath. Someone dimmed the overhead lights, and warm lamps in the corners softened the cage until it pretended to be something else. Pretend is a strong drug. So is applause. The men laughed. They said brave things in careful voices. You can't scare steel by telling it stories. Vivian stood in the little circle they made for her, tall and pleased, a conductor calling in a weather system she could dance inside. They all said yes, she told me, as if consent from the audience could bless the act. I looked at each of them in turn, not with hate. Hate is loud and spends itself too fast, but with the slow naming you do when you inventory a tool chest after a long job. I wanted them to feel seen, not as men, but as evidence. What I didn't say, while they laughed and while the blue light kept its cool on my skin, was that the camera in the corner wasn't part of her expensive set. What I didn't say was that 3 backups were already alive without me, one on a black humming box hidden behind a false panel beneath my old bench, a second encrypted where no one would find it without my map, a third due to move by mail with no return address out of Santa Fe in the morning. I didn't need to say it. I needed to breathe and count and wait for the moment they'd go home and believe the night was a successful experiment in power. When the champagne finally lost its bubbles and the jokes started to repeat, one by one they drifted away, trailing perfume and cologne and relief. The laughter shrank until it was only a memory rehearsing itself. The basement door sighed shut. Vivian didn't come back to check the lock or ask if I'd learned anything. Of course she didn't. The lesson wasn't meant for me. It was meant for the mirror she thought I was. I sat cross-legged, palms loose on my knees, and let the owls grow quiet above me. There's a certain mercy in walls when they stop pretending to be anything else. Somewhere upstairs a blind clicked softly, a faucet ran, a single glass touched a counter with a sound I have always known to belong to her. I thought of the lilies on the table, how they hold their shape even as their edges begin to curl. I thought of the way control looks so much like kindness when it wants to be fed. I thought of the 5 base bolts nearest the rear plate and the notch I had cut months ago inside the hollow steel because I had a feeling I didn't yet know how to name. I did not rattle the cage. I did not test the welds like a man trying to prove to an audience that he deserved freedom. I pressed my fingers into the shadow where the rear bar met the floor and found the hidden seam the way a locksmith recognizes a door by its breathing. The wire waited where I'd left it, bent but patient, a flathead bit snapped from a screwdriver, wrapped in an old mechanic's rag. I smiled without showing teeth. Tools for quiet people. Tools for nights when the truth needs to be turned by hand. I began with the rear left bolt, feeling for the first give, hearing the microscopic complaint of threads, each fractional movement less than a word, more than a promise. Time changes shape when you are choosing it instead of chasing it. The wire bowed, the bit scraped, the plate answered. Above me the owls lost its voices and went to sleep. I counted not minutes, not hours, just the steady repetitions of pressure and release. When the first bolt loosened free, it made a sound like a decision finally agreeing with itself. I breathed out. For more to go. I wasn't in a hurry. I had never been in a hurry. Speed is for people who are late to their own life. I intended to arrive on time. By the time the second bolt surrendered, the silence in the basement had thickened, not as absence but as witness. I could feel the weight of the house above me, boards and beams and all the curated illusions still clinging to the walls. Vivian believed she had written a story where I was the object, the artifact locked away to prove her control. But objects don't think, and I had been thinking for months. Every time her eyes lingered too long on her phone. Every trip to the city that didn't appear on her schedule. Every late return explained with a tone rehearsed just enough to sound off-key. I had been collecting her tells the way a gambler memorizes the twitch of a rival's hand. And now, with 2 bolts undone, I knew the night wasn't hers anymore. It was mine. The sound that broke the basement quiet wasn't my tool, it was the creak of the upstairs door. A rhythm of steps followed, softer than before, hesitant, almost human. Vivian descended again, robe tied loosely, hair no longer staged, bare feet carrying her weight with none of the confidence she had shown earlier. She stopped halfway down the stairs, watching me through the dim light as if trying to gauge whether I was still the man she thought she caged. "I thought maybe you'd be yelling by now," she said, her voice small, like it belonged to someone who wasn't sure of the game anymore. I met her eyes and answered without raising my tone. "That's not my language." For the first time that night, something flickered across her face, not guilt, but recognition that silence could be heavier than any threat. She tried to fill the air with reasons. She told me this wasn't meant to hurt me, that it was symbolic, some performance about taking back control. I almost laughed. A symbol, she called it. But what does a symbol mean when the steel is real? When the humiliation has teeth? I asked her if she understood what she'd done, and her silence gave me the truth I already knew. I told her to go, while she still had the choice. Her jaw tightened, her hands trembled at her sides, and then she turned, retreating up the stairs as if each step had grown heavier. The door closed behind her, and I was left with the sound of my own breathing and the steady memory of bolts that were now half loosened. She thought I was beaten, but I was cataloging, preparing, waiting. By morning, pale light cut through the narrow basement window like a blade. 4 bolts had come loose. Not enough to crawl free, but enough to prove inevitability. The house above carried on as though nothing had fractured. I heard drawers open, the coffee machine hum, a song play faintly through the speaker system, Vivian's world pretending it hadn't crossed into something criminal. Pretend is easy until someone refuses to play along. She appeared again at noon, this time with a plate in her hands. Scrambled eggs, toast, a slice of melon, like I was a child she'd grounded for bad behavior. She set it down at the cage door, her voice sharp at the edges of false care. "I wasn't going to leave you down here forever. Just one night." A symbol. I studied her face, the cracks in her calm. A symbol of what? I asked. She hesitated, then whispered, of taking back control. I took a bite of toast just to show her hands that I wasn't trembling. "You always had control," I told her. "You just didn't like the kind you had." The words unsettled her more than if I'd shouted. She wanted a reaction that confirmed her power. Instead, I gave her a mirror. Her mask faltered, and she left faster than she intended, her footsteps sharp against the floorboards. Hours passed, and then the garage door opened. I heard a voice this time, low and deliberate, gravel wrapped in velvet. Not one of the 6 from last night. This man wasn't here to celebrate, he was here to fix. Vivian's voice carried down through the vent, defensive now, stripped of her stage presence. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she told him. And his reply cut through me like a blade hidden in silk. "You don't have to leave bruises to leave damage." He wasn't asking for explanations. He was defining the terms. She asked him who he was, and his answer was simple: "You're a client. I'm here to make sure your decisions don't come back to bite you." That was the moment I knew. She hadn't just humiliated me, she'd hired a professional to clean up after her. I crouched at the vent, every word weighed like currency. His calm was dangerous, I recognized it. Men like him don't talk much because they don't need to. They act. Vivian's sharp edges had already softened into fear, her words clipped and brittle, a woman realizing her power was rented, not owned. And me? I sat in the shadows of the cage, fingers resting on a loosened bolt, the ghost of a smile on my chest. She believed she had written the script. But scripts end. And I was already rewriting mine. When the basement door opened again, Vivian came first, trying to look casual in a pale blouse and pressed jeans, as though normal clothes could erase what she had staged. But behind her stepped the man whose voice I had already memorized, Marcus Voss. He carried himself like a surgeon, eyes sharp, movements economical, every glance a calculation. He didn't waste time with small talk. His gaze swept the cage, tracing the welds, the bolts, the anchoring points, not as though he feared me, but as though he were assessing whether the structure had been built to code. "This him?" he asked flatly. Vivian nodded, her hands clasped too tightly in front of her. Voss stepped closer, the air shifting with the quiet authority of someone who had been in too many rooms where fear was currency. I rose slowly, met his stare, and asked, "You with the cleanup crew?" A faint smile flickered across his face, a smile that belonged to someone who didn't believe in jokes. "Let's say I'm here to restore balance," he said. Balance. The word landed in the room like an iron weight. I held his gaze and shrugged. "So that's what it's called now." He studied me, amused by the lack of panic in my face. "You don't seem very concerned, Mr. Calder." My answer came without heat. "You haven't done anything yet." Vivian shifted uncomfortably beside him, but she stayed quiet. I leaned closer to the bars. "That depends on how much you told him." Her silence told me enough, but I pressed further. "I'd start by asking how many cameras are in this house." The faintest flicker crossed Voss's expression. His eyes shifted toward Vivian, and she paled. "Don't listen to him," she said quickly. "He's bluffing." I knelt by the corner of the cage, tapped twice on the floor, and the small dome in the ceiling gave a blink in acknowledgement. I looked up. "I don't bluff." The temperature of the room changed instantly. Voss's calm narrowed, sharpened. "Where's the feed?" he asked. My voice was steady. "Stored, duplicated, distributed. A copy goes out every 24 hours. Automatic." Vivian's breath hitched like a caught wire. Voss turned to her, his voice suddenly edged. "You didn't tell me there were recordings." Her reply stumbled over itself. I didn't know. He must have, but he cut her off. "You hosted something like this and never swept a room? You weren't thinking." His disappointment in her was worse than anger. She flinched like a schoolgirl caught cheating. That was the first shift in power. He understood what I was saying. He wasn't stupid, he knew leverage when he saw it. He looked back at me, his eyes narrowing. "You're not going to the police," he said, testing me. "I'm not," I replied. "But you could." I gave him a slow nod. "I could. Or I could wait." He frowned. "Wait for what?" My answer was simple. "For gravity." He understood. The silence stretched, hard as glass, until finally he turned on Vivian with a tone sharp enough to cut. "You need to get ahead of this before the others figure it out." And just like that, he pulled her from the room. The door closed, their footsteps retreating upstairs. I sat back against the bars, not broken, not afraid. The bolts behind me loosened further under my fingers. I hadn't climbed out yet, but I no longer needed to. The cage wasn't my prison anymore, it was my war room. And I wasn't trapped. I was waiting for the right storm to arrive. When the house finally emptied, I moved with a precision that had nothing to do with panic and everything to do with patience. I reseated the loosened bolts, hid the wire, and set the back panel so perfectly that even a professional's eye wouldn't notice the give. When Vivian and Voss had left, I wasn't rattling bars, I was designing the next act. Hours later, when the garage door rolled open and her voice carried upstairs in a rush of anger and fatigue, I knew her world was already cracking. I waited until the house went still again before I slipped out, stretching my body into freedom for the first time in 2 days. My legs ached from stillness, but my hands were steady. I went to the false cabinet under my old bench and pulled out the humming server, its green light pulsing like a heartbeat. 3 backups. Untouched. Untouchable. The question wasn't whether to use them, it was how to place each piece of evidence like a scalpel, one incision at a time. I began with Daniel Keaton, the former friend who had lifted a glass in my basement while I sat silent behind bars. His life was a glass house, married, 2 children, a neat accounting firm in town, the kind of man who believed his name was too dull to carry scandal. I drafted the message with deliberate slowness. Subject: do you remember this night, Daniel? Attached, a short video file, him laughing while Vivian leaned into him, my cage blurred behind them. Nothing more than implication. I sent it. 75 minutes later, his reply buzzed back, full of panic. Please don't. I didn't know. I thought it was staged. Please, don't send it to my wife. I'll do anything. I didn't answer. I opened a file, typed his name, and wrote one sentence beneath it: fear is the first truth. That was enough. Then Caleb Moreland. He had laughed the loudest that night, fingers too familiar on Vivian's shoulder, pouring drinks as if he owned the room. But Caleb was in the middle of a custody battle in Westchester, swearing under oath he'd been home with his daughter the very night he stood in my basement. I clipped the timestamp video, 9:52 p.m., and sent it with a subject line meant for his ex-wife's lawyer: for your case file. No explanation. No demands. 28 minutes later, the reply came back: thank you. You've just secured full custody. The incision had been made, clean and deep, and Caleb would feel it in ways Vivian had not foreseen. One by one, the facade was beginning to collapse. And I wasn't shouting. I wasn't threatening. I was simply delivering gravity. That afternoon, the police arrived. 2 men, firm voices, polite but edged with suspicion. A missing person report, they explained, filed by Walter Greer, my 78-year-old neighbor. I had told Walter once in passing, if you don't see me at the mailbox for more than 2 days, something's wrong. He remembered. The officers asked Vivian if they could see me. Her voice was tight, hurried, but she let them into the house. Their boots crossed the hardwood, opening doors, checking closets, until finally one of them stood at the top of the basement steps. The lock clicked. I returned to my place in the cage, bolts receded, posture calm. They came 3 steps down. Sir, one said. What's going on down here? Vivian cut in quickly. He asked for this. It's therapy. Symbolic. He read about it online. They turned to me, their eyes narrowing with unease. I met their gaze, then hers, then back. She takes good care of me, I said evenly. The officer hesitated, doubt flickering across his face, but without a complaint, they turned and left. Vivian's victory smile never reached her eyes when she returned. You could have told them everything, she said. I nodded. I know. Then why didn't you? She asked. My answer was simple, because I wanted to see how well you lie under pressure. You cracked. Her silence was the first admission I'd heard all night. Upstairs, I could hear her pacing, phone pressed to her ear, her voice brittle and desperate. She was unraveling, and she didn't even realize that silence, my silence, was undoing her faster than rage ever could. Every minute I stayed calm, the walls pressed tighter around her. She thought she had caged me. She hadn't understood I was the one keeping her in place, watching the cracks form, one by one. Vivian didn't sleep that night. I could hear the rhythm of her movements through the floorboards, the restless pacing of someone who had begun to realize the story was no longer hers to write. She wandered from room to room, whispering frantically into her phone, blinds clicking open and shut, the sharp sound of glass against countertop as she tried to steady herself with wine. She was unraveling, and she knew I was listening. She knew silence was the knife I had chosen. The next morning she appeared at the basement door again, setting down another plate of toast without meeting my eyes. Not food, not care, just a hollow ritual meant to keep the lie alive. I didn't touch it. She left after less than a minute, her silence louder than words. By noon, she had made 6 phone calls, each one shorter, sharper, more desperate. She was no longer the orchestrator of a spectacle, she was the actor trapped in a role she couldn't escape. Then came the sound that shifted everything, the doorbell at 2:37 in the afternoon. Vivian froze above me, and I knew instantly who it must be. Voices carried through the vent, 2 officers, following up on Walter Greer's missing person report. They asked to see me. Vivian stammered excuses, then reluctantly let them inside. I could hear them moving through the house, opening doors, their boots heavy on the hardwood. Finally, the basement lock turned. I returned to my corner of the cage, bolts receded just tight enough, posture calm. The officer stepped 3 stairs down and froze when he saw me. His voice was steady but uneasy. "Sir, are you all right?" Vivian jumped in quickly, her tone sharp, over-rehearsed. "It's therapy." "Symbolic." "He asked for this." The officer's eyes searched mine. In that silence I had the power to end it all, to tell the truth. Instead, I let my words fall like stones into water. She takes good care of me. The doubt on his face lingered, but without a complaint, they left. The door shut, and the house was ours again. Vivian returned 20 minutes later, her face pale, shaken. "You let them go," she said. I nodded. "You could have told them everything." I answered calmly, "I wanted to see how well you lie under pressure." "You cracked." That night, she didn't come back to the basement. She stayed upstairs, pacing until dawn, her phone buzzing with calls she didn't return. By morning, I heard the garage open, a car idling, then tires crunching over gravel as she drove away. When the silence stretched 30 minutes longer, I moved. The bolt slid free under my hands, the back panel shifted, and I stepped out into the basement, no longer a prisoner but a man carrying his own evidence. I walked to the workshop bench, opened the false cabinet, and checked the server. Everything was intact, every file alive in 3 copies, waiting. I didn't touch them. I didn't have to. They had already started their work. All I needed to do now was decide where to place the weight first, and how hard to let it fall. By noon I was sitting in the living room, phone in hand, choosing carefully. Caleb Moreland's file had already toppled his custody case. Daniel Keaton was cracking in his own emails, begging. But this time it was Tyler Aaron Pike, the youngest of the 6, the one whose smile had been the most careless. That evening, the doorbell rang again. When I opened it, Aaron stood there, his face pale, his voice cracking. "I need to talk to you," he stammered. He looked nothing like the man who had smirked in my basement. His confidence was gone, stripped away by the anonymous email that had already reached him. He stepped inside like someone entering a church, expecting judgment, hoping for mercy. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I thought it was a joke. I thought it was staged." I said nothing, just let him sink into the silence, let him see himself reflected in it. Finally, he broke. "It's falling apart. My firm's getting complaints. My girlfriend left. She saw the video. She won't even look at me." His hand shook as he spoke, and when his words faltered, I gave him only one reply: "You stood there. And you smiled." His shoulders collapsed. He knew. He knew the truth didn't need me to shout, it only needed me to wait. I placed a flash drive on the table between us, its weight small but absolute. On this is everything, I told him. High resolution. Every face, every voice. You can take it and bury it, or you can leave it here and go tell the truth to the people who matter. That choice is yours. He stared at it for a long time, then stood, his voice quiet but certain. I won't run. But I won't ask for forgiveness yet. I haven't earned it. He left the drive behind. The door shut, and I knew the dominoes were falling one by one, not from force, but from silence heavy enough to break them. Upstairs, Vivian waited, her world shrinking with every hour. But she still didn't know the truth, that I wasn't trying to break her. I was simply letting her stand long enough to break herself. That night, when Vivian finally came downstairs, she found me not in the basement but seated calmly in the living room, legs crossed, as though I'd been waiting for her all along. Her eyes narrowed, uncertain, as if she no longer recognized the man she thought she had caged. "You're done?" she asked, her voice trembling with both fear and defiance. "No," I said, my tone steady. "I'm finished." She tilted her head, confusion breaking through her mask. Is that supposed to mean something different? I met her eyes with a calm that cut sharper than rage. It means I'm not going to break you. You'll do that yourself. The words struck harder than anything I could have shouted. She swallowed, her lips trembling. So this is it? She whispered. I stood, walked past her toward the open front door. Yes, I said, stepping out into the night air that felt colder but cleaner than anything inside the house. Where'll you go? She asked, her voice thin. I turned back once, the stars sharp above me, the driveway gravel crunching under my boots. Forward. I didn't need to look back at her face. I didn't need to see the cracks finally spreading through her armor. The truth was already working inside her like rust under paint, eating at the illusion she had tried to control. The men she had chosen as witnesses were falling apart piece by piece. Daniel was begging in emails. Caleb had lost custody of his daughter in court. Aaron had come to me trembling, the first to admit the truth aloud. And the others? Their turn was coming. I didn't need to push. I didn't need to threaten. Gravity doesn't hurry, but it never fails. Vivian's empire of control was collapsing from within, and I had simply stepped aside to let it fall. As I walked down the quiet street, I thought of the cage in the basement. Not as a place of humiliation, but as a mirror. She had built it believing she could lock me inside, believing she could prove to herself and to her admirers that I was nothing more than a stable prop in her grand performance. But what she had really built was a frame that revealed her. Every bar, every bolt, every cruel smile was recorded, and no stage light could wash that away. The cage was never mine, it was always hers. And she would live in it long after I had gone. I didn't carry hatred with me. Hatred burns too fast. I carried something sharper, clarity. I wasn't walking away to escape. I wasn't running from what she had done. I was walking through it, carrying with me the patience, the silence, and the evidence of who she truly was. I didn't need to destroy her. She would destroy herself. My role was only to hold the mirror steady until she couldn't look anymore. The night air felt like absolution. Each step forward was a step away from her stage, her audience, her lies. I had been caged, yes, but I had also been tested. And in the quiet of that basement, with nothing but steel and silence for company, I had learned something she never understood. You don't break a man who knows how to wait. You don't defeat someone who has already made peace with patience. The cage hadn't broken me. It had built me. And now, as the stars sharpened above me, I finally understood the truth. I was free not because I escaped, but because I refused to let her write my ending.
Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, shocked you, or simply made you think, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a comment, your thoughts, your story, your truth. Subscribe for more raw, real, and unforgettable confessions. And if this story made you feel seen, share it. Someone else might need to hear it too. You're not alone here. This channel is a safe space for those who've been betrayed, broken, and rebuilt.